For those of you who don't know who I am, Blane Stacy, I'm a rangeland specialist for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. As part of this agreement that allowed these grazing workshops to be put on in partnership with Noble Research and Mays County Conservation District, is we got to talk about poultry litter and poultry litter management in northeast Oklahoma. So for 30 minutes, we're going to talk about chicken poop, if that's all right with y'all. So, to start this off, I'm a rangeland management guy. I've been involved, interested, excited about native grasslands, pasture land my whole life. It started in 8th grade in FFA. I did the rangeland judging in high school, was fortunate enough to be pretty competitive. We were national champions. I got a degree in rangeland management, and then after I graduated, which was in 2010, we went into a big drought. So I basically did anything I could to survive. So a little 2-year stretch of my life, I was a water quality monitoring specialist for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. That's how I got my foot in the door. And it truly opened my eyes to a lot of the cause and effect issues that we have in northeast Oklahoma, but as well as the whole country as far as land management relates to water quality. And one of those big issues in northeast Oklahoma is poultry litter application in Oklahoma. I'm not anti-poultry litter by any means. It is a available resource here in this ecoregion at a lower per unit cost than a lot of other synthetic, chemical, or commercial fertilizers. The issue that we have kind of gotten into is the old mentality of, well, if a ton of it's great, 2 tons must be better. And we're starting to see some concerns and some issues within the watersheds due to the over-application of poultry litter. Has anybody, just show of hands, has anybody had any issues with poultry litter application on your properties? Or maybe your neighbors applying chicken litter and it causing positive or negative benefits on your property? So the comment was, utilize it on your property close to town, and the initial impact is the smell, the odor of that chicken litter. One of several issues. So what we're getting into with specifically the Illinois River watershed, which is what this multi-purpose grant was written for, but we expanded that out to include a lot of northeast Oklahoma, is total phosphorus loading. The eastern half of Oklahoma, as indicated by these colored counties, we're showing that excess litter application is our #1 concern. But also, it is the management practices on a lot of these landscapes. So think about areas that host a lot of the poultry industry here in Oklahoma. What kind of land forms and ecosystems are along that eastern corridor? Is it nice, loamy soil that's 8 feet deep? We're in Cherokee County, where a lot of my family hails from, they're really good at growing rocks in that country. So a lot of that Ozark Plateau, thin chert rock type soils. But here in Mays County and kind of that Highway 75 corridor, we're still close enough to the poultry producing regions that we can utilize those as nutrients. The overland flow, the accumulation of these nutrients within these watersheds, we're talking streams, rivers, lakes, are affecting the water quality in those watersheds. So we're trying to address that with these grazing management workshops to incorporate the land management, the grazing management, in conjunction with poultry litter application to address these issues. And we work this time. Whose place looks like this? I'm hoping your place looks like one side and your neighbors look like the other. So the continuous set stock grazing management scenarios that we see in a lot of these producers, I'm not knocking on anybody. We all have different life responsibilities. We may have a job in town, off-farm responsibilities that we need to take care of. But in no scenario do we need to be taking our grazing lands down to that intense of a grazing event, or at least a long-term grazing event. So because of the landscape looking like this in a lot of our scenic river and natural areas, we're seeing these pristine, higher quality communities, both water communities, land communities, and people communities being severely impacted. So much that we have been involved in, I say we, the state of Oklahoma has seen many lawsuits involving these scenic river areas. We're talking the river, Illinois River itself, Spring Creek, the Spring Creek Coalition, seeing these issues within the state of Oklahoma as it directly relates to poultry industry. And then right there at the bottom, appropriate land management that includes litter application. So if we're talking about chicken litter, 99.9% of the time we're talking about phosphorus. Phosphorus, one of the key 3 nutrients that we need for plant growth and production. Phosphorus is kind of like the motor oil in your truck motor. If nitrogen is the gas, it drives the production. It gets you from A to B. Phosphorus is like that motor oil. You don't see as much ebb and flow in that system with phosphorus application. And a lot of our poultry litter that we have available to us here in the state of Oklahoma is not necessarily higher in phosphorus availability, but if we're utilizing chicken litter to meet nitrogen goals, we can very easily over-apply phosphorus if we're not careful. And here we see all the tributaries of the Illinois River and the Illinois River itself are impacted by total phosphorus loading. And some bacteria, but we're focusing on phosphorus today. Phosphorus can cause these algae blooms. So when we talk about nutrient application, do y'all just go to the co-op and load a trailer up and go dump it on your landscape? That's like filling up your truck full of gas or replacing the oil. How do you know how much you need? You got to go get your soils test. So for $10 at OSU Extension, or if you want to utilize more in-depth soil evaluation testing, the Haney test through Regen or Ward Ag Labs is one of those popular tests. Get your soils testing done before we do anything. In fact, one of our ongoing projects through the Soil Health Implementation Program, we're requiring those producers to get a soil evaluation done before we look at implementing any kind of soil amendment or soil nutrient application. We can save money, and then I mentioned a moment ago the differences in those levels within that poultry litter. If we're only trying to address one nutrient goal, we can very easily over-apply those other available nutrients that are within that chicken litter. Because we're trying to avoid. Anybody thirsty? Anybody want to take a good long drink out of that water? Anybody have water sources on their property that look like this at any time of the year? I do. It's a combination of factors. This year, drought is playing a lot into that, but I'm trying to remedy the issues on my property because my property doesn't just affect me because I live less than a mile from Oologah Lake, and if I have water that looks like that is leaving my property and affecting not necessarily somebody else's profitability, but their recreational area, they're going to be pretty mad at me. So we need to be able to reduce the over-application and hopefully make everybody happy. So we've already covered this. I didn't know where we were going to interject within the conversation today, but we've discussed how the overutilization of that vegetation reduces the ability of those roots to intake those nutrients through appropriate grazing management, appropriate rest and recovery. Those plants have a higher ability to utilize those nutrients available. You got a bigger gas tank or bigger oil tank to put that oil in, you can save it for later as well. Here's kind of something that I've learned through my water quality experience is even when we try to implement what I call appropriate conservation practices, we're starting to see some secondary effects. You know, it's that butterfly effect. You drop a pebble in the water and the ripples can go on a lot larger than the initial impact. So we're actually getting some excessive nutrient accumulation I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, but I may not come up with it. We're shooting ourselves in the foot trying to shoot at the target. Tile flow, subsurface flow, overland flow, where I think about riparian area exclusion and filter strips. A lot of our conservation practices that we installed 15, 20 years ago to address not just nutrient overland flow, but soil erosion, water overland flow. Now we're seeing these accumulations of nutrients become a source of phosphorus almost unintentionally. We stopped it all right there at the water's edge. Now there's just a great big load of nutrients that will slowly leach out into that ecosystem over time. So we're actually looking at remedying some of those practices that we thought was a good idea at the time, but turned out not to be such a good use. Again, utilizing soil health. Anytime we implement those principles of soil health, which we're going to discuss at length later in the grazing workshop, minimizing that soil disturbance, keeping that ecological functioning, or keeping that ecological function really functioning through diverse plant community, the root systems, utilizing those livestock to keep that ecosystem function going, but also as a profit potential. We've got people that are utilizing chicken litter, combining it with biochar for soil amendments, creating an organic product. Adding that biochar reduces the scalding or burning effect of high nutrient available poultry litter. So we've got a lot of opportunities to utilize chicken litter. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not anti-poultry litter. It's just appropriate use and function within that system is where we're going to get the greatest benefit. So we have seen some negative effects. When we talk about native soil biota, all the creatures that live in the ground, there's been some various research shown that a little dab will do you. So excess poultry litter application has negatively affected soil biology. Reek et al. Describes a reduction in that native biota in swine manure. Phosphorus also having the ability to interfere with microbial fungi, negatively affecting the colonization of those roots by that mycorrhizal fungus with excess phosphate levels. And then talk about the Oklahoma recommendations. We've been shown this chart ad nauseum in our plant and soil science courses through university, through OSU Extension. But I want to point out something down here with any of our established permanent grasses. As long as we've got 50% sufficiency, we're not going to see a massive increase in production by adding any more. You know, if we've got 100% sufficiency, we're not having to add anything. You know, that's a perfect world scenario. But even at adding a 20-pound phosphate will only increase that sufficiency by a 5% margin. So take that as you will. In my opinion, if I've got half the amount of phosphorus that I'm supposed to have, I'm not going to spend any money at my house because it's not going to be a net profit for me based on my grazing management scenario. I'm okay with the amount of grass I got growing, so I'm not going to add any more phosphorus, provided all my other nutrients are there and available. So I took these excerpts, one from Texas A&M, one from AsianTurfGrass.com of all places. So buildup of phosphorus in lawns, gardens, pastures can cause negative effects. That old adage of, well, if this much is good, double must be better, we're actually showing that reduction in that plant's ability to uptake those nutrients, causing issues with growth, stunting that growth. Even down here at the bottom, adding more phosphorus beyond what that plant needs has no benefit to the grass, but has that potential to cause pollution to those water bodies. So again, I go back to that soils testing. Know the amount that you need. Know your context. Know the splits that you have between nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Use everything in combination. Use it if you've got it. But please, please know what you need. Monitor your applications to limit negative compounding cascading effects. We've had some studies show shallower, more rigid, slower root growth, iron and zinc deficiencies, less ability to uptake those trace minerals because of excess phosphate in the soil, less stability in the root zone. The plant literally does not have the rigidity and the structure to maintain its vertical growth structure because the roots don't have the ability to anchor itself in that soil. And then, I mentioned this a moment ago, stunted plant growth. Too much phosphorus can also interfere with nitrogen absorption. So if you're applying chicken litter to address nitrogen and you're not even paying attention to that phosphate, you're losing the ability to absorb that nitrogen at the same time. So you're essentially putting that chicken litter out and receiving no benefit. We could talk about calcium. Calcium gets locked up in that cycle due to excess phosphate, because that phosphate will bind to those trace minerals. If you're adding ag lime to address pH, phosphate's just going to grab a hold of it and hold it locked up. It's not going to do hardly anything to remedy or address the soil pH within that system. Then we can see plant tissue having that negative response, bleaching, whiting out, stunted growth, all not good in that system. So that's our goal, was we wanted to incorporate chicken litter discussion within our conversations today. One, to meet that grant deliverable that they told us we had to talk about. But here in Mayes County, in Northeast Oklahoma in general, it's an available resource. Use it if you've got it, if you can make it work for you. But we just want to make sure, be careful with it. Too much of a good thing, not always a good thing. And I'll end with that.